Welcome to Organize, Reason and Talk, ORT. Our panelists today are Ebony Harmony, with 25 years of working with children and families, Diane White, who also has 25 years of working with children and families, and Dr. Feelgood, radio presenter and DJ. And I am Kush-I, your host. And today we're talking about the difficulties in accepting Black success. So question one to our panelists. Is African or Black success harder for the Africans to accept when compared to their white counterparts accepting European success?
Yeah, I think there are actually quite a few strands to this argument. I don't think it's as simple as yes or no. We think about, the Black community, Black race. We've been portrayed as in a negative, completely negative light. We're either rapists or thieves, can't be trusted, Black is bad. That's us, okay? And that's always been our experience from childhood throughout in one form or another. Now, racism is ever prevalent, and yes, it may be a little bit more sophisticated in some work environment, like the work environment is still there, but it's very sophisticated. Okay. Now, I put it that it could be argued, that somewhere in our subconscious, that because it's been ever prevalent, and it, throughout the ages, throughout kind of formative years, adult life, our twilight years, it's always there. So perhaps in our subconscious, it's something that we subscribe to some degree.
What is something that we subscribe to?
Let me finish. How many times, and I think I certainly have been guilty of this at some point. We see somebody who's successful, doing really well, driving a nice car, doing so forth, and you get to thinking,
I know exactly what's
right. You're immediately suspicious or skeptical. Wonder where they're gotten the money from to do that. Oh, are they a drug dealer? Are they so and so? I mean,
okay.
Enemy.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if I don't believe it's something that we just vehemently believe, but I think because we've been exposed to such negativities, and sometimes in, things that we've been exposed to perhaps from our parents, don't trust so-and-so, this, that, we've heard
you hear something enough, you begin to believe it.
Absolutely, coupled with all the negativity that professionals, teachers and so forth has been, the media, TV, and that's been kind of like just pumped into us subconsciously, consciously. It's there. So I think, we have that within us to some degree. Now, I know I've been guilty of it, but I would also add that because of my increased awareness, my increased consciousness, I understand better where that perhaps come from, and I give more respect to somebody who I see who's really successful. I don't question where it's come from. I almost have a kind of like a removed pride for them.
That's what I do. And I'm not interested how you got it, etc. Fair play to you, I respect that.
Yeah.
But who am I to judge, or who am I to question where you got it from?
Absolutely. I mean, that said, if I find out later that you're selling crack and ruining our children, then I've got something to say. But the prejudgment isn't there, and I will quite happily say, well done, or it's really good what you're doing, and so forth.
Right.
But I think in relation to the question, like I said, I think it could be argued that sometimes it's something that's ingrained with us.
Well, don't you find, in the working environment, stuff like that, you find that you're constantly trying to prove yourself?
I certainly feel, because I'm not sure if I think we need to prove ourselves, because I believe that we are as good as, and in many instances better than our counterparts. But I know that we have to work
harder for
three times as hard to get half as much, most definitely. Yeah. I don't think that's questioned. The thing is, success it's not a phenomenon. Yeah, it's not something that only the elite can do. It's only, reserved for a certain part of the community or certain cultures or white people, what have you. It isn't. But I believe it's something that cannot be done independently. You need the support of family, friends, community. And I think if we're to be more successful as a community, I think we really have to have more regard, more respect for each other, and
I think you need input from all communities
an
in order.
investment, and that investment can be from as little as somebody visiting your shop and buying the products in your shop, to maybe a more successful Black or African professional who's prepared to invest.
I'm smiling here because how many times have you walked into a West Indian shop, stood next to someone, and to me, if something's marked up for £1, £5, 5p, pay it.
Yeah,
I want your product,
absolutely.
I'll pay for it.
Absolutely.
But why is it, if you walk into your own people's shop, sometimes you will get, can I pay you this for it? Can I pay? It's not there for argument.
Absolutely.
You pay for it, but you will say, okay, I'm not buying from you, but go next door and probably pay twice as much for it without even asking.
Absolutely, and it's really
so instead of building your own, you're constantly putting your own down.
That's because though there's a real problem with what it is success looks like. What do we mean by it though? What are we as a community meaning when we say we want more success? Is that what are the expectations that go with that?
But then I look at, not being negative and things like that, but when you look at the years Black people have been in the country, etc., where we are now is not that much further forward than when our parents were here. We're still struggling, etc. But yet, you've got Asian people come into the country and stuff like that. Now, just take them as an example. They've done what Black people were doing when parents first came in the country, work hard, all the hours, stuff like that. They would have one shop, all the families would work the one shop. And then the money from that will buy a second shop, and before you know it, all of them have got their own shops. They're prepared to break the boundaries and work the 12-hour shifts and stuff like that.
But they're also prepared to enslave their women to be quite draconian.
I'm just talking work ethics here, though. When you're talking about business and stuff like that.
You cannot detach it too, because culturally, they have their problems.
No, everybody's got their problems, but all I was comparing there was the fact that, if you just look at the work ethic.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can't detach it. It's like you're going to say you want a woman, but you don't want the shopping.
So you're saying there's oppression?
I'm saying there are things that are cultural that sometimes I see Black people making these comparisons like they want to cherry pick out of somebody else's culture. It's interesting that when people are talking, especially people from the West Indies, and they might talk about Indian, they might talk about Jamaican Indian, they might talk about Indian. You will talk to a Black person and they will say, yeah, but. For me, it just looks like we always there's a criteria we give successful Black people. There's some internalized suspicions.
You see, that said, right, the limitations and restrictions to Black success are very real. Okay, those are very real. But I have to ask myself, is the responsibility all ours in terms of the barriers?
I'll give you an example. Idris Elba. Will there be, do you think, more people, as a white person, who just like in movies, but if you talk to Black people, yes, but you're going to get the butts coming. Is there more of a resistance to just accepting the Black success for what it is?
The things that you've highlighted about what all these barriers and the stuff that we internalise, because that's there, we place this massive weight of expectation on these people. So it's not enough for them to be successful. They've got to pull up the rest of us. They're not worthwhile unless all of us can somehow piggyback on their success and also get something out of it for ourselves. So that is there. And I think, to me, there's a kind of recent element to this, because when my parents came here in 1960, and the infrastructure that was here was not geared up to accommodate them. So their generation had to fall back on their own resources, their own instincts to get what they needed out of the system, and they did it. And they did the work in 2 jobs, they lived in poor, overcrowded conditions, and they managed to get their own homes, a lot of them. Many managed to build a second home back where they came from, some have retired back there, some haven't. But there was a model there that was in place that out of necessity they created something. they've managed to generate the funds to do it. It wasn't necessarily businesses, but it was a different kind of success. They had homes at a time when a lot of white people didn't own their own homes in this country. So they were owner-occupiers, many with second homes. So there was a model there, and my generation who were born and raised here, who were put into this system and educated, quote unquote, in this system, have not been able to build on that. Something got lost. We went into that system and came out of it having lost this connection with what our parents started.
Now we're in a position where we have to, with our children, we're trying to reinstall that.
Exactly.
I had that conversation a weekend with someone that's doing that. They've got little clubs and stuff, sewing clubs and stuff for children and stuff to try and introduce what we learned from our parents.
That's just it, the culture. We've lost a lot of our.
I could tell you growing up, you know, on a Sunday you had your rice and peas and stuff like that. You know, you'd have soup on a certain day. You might have bully beef and rice on the next day, stuff like that. Nowadays, it's just a case of, I'm so caught up with work and stuff, it's got to be a takeaway. You know?
Yeah.
You look at a lot of children nowadays, do they know about the rice and peas and stuff like that? You know, growing up, you know, like sufferers feed and stuff like that. But, you know, children nowadays, it's just like, oh, what's that? Yeah. You know, I'm not being funny. I'm sitting here speaking in an English accent. When I was growing up, I started back home. It was never heard
of.
You see what I mean? But you do move, obviously people move to make things easier and better for themselves and stuff like that. You know, me speaking to my son, if it's like in a West Indian accent, it's like, what? Sorry? You know, which it is a shame.
So how does that become a difficulty in accepting black success? Because one of the other things that I wanted to talk about was, is this idea of unity being a prerequisite to black success fear on those who are being successful?
But I don't know if it's a prerequisite, but I don't think, I mean, you mentioned before about people feeling they should piggyback on someone who's successful. Now, I'm not against nepotism. It happens around us all day long, only we're not part of that, which is why we're left on the bottom rung all the time. You know, and those, as I said, who are less talented, skilled, or knowledgeable, you'll sit there and you watch them rise and rise and rise. Yeah, because there's nepotism happening around you.
Nepotism being, for those of us who may not understand what nepotism is,
it's almost people get an advancement based on who you know, not what you know.
Okay.
It's not skill or merit based.
So by that you're saying, if I can tease it out, that white people help white people.
That's it, exactly. Okay. Exactly.
So in that, then you're saying this idea of black people being unified as a prerequisite before they become successful is not actually an unfair demand on them.
See, I'm not sure if I'd use the word demand, but I think the more and more we realise or be honest with ourselves with what's happening around us, the more we are proud of ourselves and each other, the more we will realise that actually this is what we have to do to make us as a community successful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. I mean, because we're not getting it on merit and we're not going to get it from the white community. I think we need to step outside of this critiquing of each other or thinking that it's wrong to think that we should jump on the back of somebody else. I mean, it's not as crude as that, but I think it's wrong to kind of make it somewhere and not look at the talent, skill within your community and try and bring those through as well. I mean, if we look at Tulsa in 1921, when there's the Tulsa riot, then Tulsa was known as what was it called? The Black Wall Street, or Little Africa, and that was a community who was immensely successful, where some of the most brilliant minds came together and they built a really successful community. Hospitals, libraries, law firms, schools, on the levels that we don't even have here now. And they were so successful that the Ku Klux Klan waged war against them, and because of that, under the premise of a black man having raped a white woman, it didn't happen. But that was their excuse to go in and tear it all apart. And over 3,000 black people lost their lives and business and so forth. But they believed in nepotism because they were fully aware, very much aware, that was the only way that they can survive, be successful as a community.
They also had a color bar at the time, and there was segregation, which in a sense they had no choice but to provide provide for their own.
Well,
It was
yes and
it was a
no.
ring-fenced community.
But then, yes or no? I mean, you could be a ring-fenced community, but still be divided and trying to hold on the little that you've got for your own, nuclear within that. But they were broader in terms of building a community, or a large community that was successful. So the whole community was successful. Nepotism was central to what they were doing. They realised very early on that was what was necessary for them to be successful, but not in the short term, but in the long term, and on a broader spectrum as well.
How does that tie in then with our views around accepting black success? Because, we have this need, this is my observation, that people need to be godly, that they need to be looking after the environment. We have all these kind of conditions that we attach to people who are going up the ladder, which isn't necessarily there with the white counterparts.
I don't know if it's attached to it, but with the white counterparts, I'm not sure.
Just do your own kind of research and see how many people, maybe some people could say, Europeans are not the best people to be direct. Maybe they have a private view that they're not telling you. But I'm just going generally, you're speaking with somebody and they will say, oh yes, but him no believe in a God, or him not do this for the community, or him not do that for the environment, or him don't have the right moral standing. These are things which I see accompanies. It's like a criteria that you have to have.
It seems to be about whether or not we as a people feel that we can claim ownership of that particular person. If we feel like we've got some kind of grip on them, we're more accepting. If we don't, then we're very, very critical of them. I think it has more to do with that. So
the thing is, though, it's just a lot of people are too quick to judge.
Yeah.
They just take things on face value. You don't take the time out to know what kind of person they are or anything like that. It's just, what you see is what you get.
Are you saying that if you spend more time around them, that the fact that they're with somebody white that would be softened for you?
No, it shouldn't be. It's why could that?
Do you think actually they're supposed to stay with somebody black in a business?
No, not at all. Why shouldn't that? Why shouldn't that, or why wouldn't that black woman have been successful before she met that person?
I agree with you entirely. But
it's not.
What I'm saying is, going back to this thing about ownership, that there is a pattern of when you become really successful, there is no conduit, or there's less of a conduit with your community. And go back to this idea of black.
If I step backwards, it's going to hold me back.
So you look at soul music in the 60s or the 70s, there was a voice to express, whether it's James Brown or Marvin Gaye. They're expressing some of the pain from their community. No, complete cut off unless it reaches crescendo like the Black Lives Matter.
There is an expectation that once you've entered into this so-called successful realm, that you'll leave something of yourself behind.
Within our community, that has an effect on us.
So the question is, what is our view on this requirement of having to leave our people at the door? Welcome to Organize, Reason and Talk, ORT. Our panelists today are Ebony Harmony, with 25 years of working with children and families, Diane White, who also has 25 years of working with children and families, and Dr. Feelgood, radio presenter and DJ. And I am Kush-I, your host.
And today we're talking about the difficulties in accepting black success.
Okay, so I have to ask, is success not about catering to the masses? Okay, and the masses is not just black people. Mm-hmm. So, and we talk about business models. Mm-hmm. We have to keep that in mind to have success. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're not working with a big business model, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful. Yeah, I mean, let me just think about Levi Roots, his restaurant. Mm-hmm. People complain that the portions are portion controlled and it doesn't taste like this and what have you. However, it's a very successful business. Why? Well, it has to be portion controlled because it's a business. You have to be able to make absolutely, yeah. So you have to do that, and where we don't do that in our smaller shops, we're not going to make that much profit. Okay, you can go to Levi Roots, and there's a good percentage of black people. There's also a good percentage of white people, India, whoever. So you've got to cater to the masses, do you not?
Why is it then it happens with this gentrification? It don't happen where black people live. For instance, Levi Roots is in Westfields, which is private land. So there is something about your civil rights being removed. We've seen it in places like Harlem. We've seen this model happening in Brixton, where there is an effort to move black people out and then bring in this kind of sterile way. So many things about it that you would recognize starts to change. Black people have proven they can provide global businesses. So the idea that somehow we can't make something that everybody wants, I don't think that's something that's been fully tested out. We can't do it.
But that's not fine, like what I'm saying. But sorry,
Okay.
but I think what we have to step up our game. We have to. How many times have we been into a West Indian local restaurant? Okay, right. You complain about the way they speak to you. And that's right. It's the environment and what have you. So are we saying we shouldn't raise our quality standards? I think we have to. We can't expect more if we're not prepared to invest more in ourselves.
I'm not sure that we don't have. I've seen many successful black businesses, but then again, going back to, because you've raised this thing about nepotism and networks and all the rest of it. Quite often, some of these people don't have these networks. Is there a responsibility on successful people, your Beyoncés of this world, your Levi Roots of this world, whoever it is, to maintain that conduit with their community? Because what is the message that's being sent out? Because on some level, we understand what you're saying to me is, I need to change for me to have what you have.
I think a lot depends on what your view is of what Levi Roots is actually selling.
I don't want to focus on him.
Okay, but as an example,
it's a model.
It's a model.
Model I'm looking
He's
at.
selling something, but are we looking at it purely in terms of the product and how he's marketing it, or are we taking a broader view about what is this man actually doing with his profits? Who is he employing? Who is it? Is there something more going on there?
Great point.
That we're not actually seeing? So he's selling what many people might think is a watered down version of our culture to people who are not necessarily looking like us, so they're not going to be the wiser about it. And he's using the proceeds from that to do something that we might actually be benefiting from, but we haven't taken the time to investigate that.
You're saying, in a sense,
Go away and get more information.
There is a culture, for example, in America, I know, a lot of the very, very successful blacks in America, your actors and your pop star, they have this thing of, as soon as they start making the big money, they set up a foundation or a charity or something. They start to find it because they know they're going to come in for this criticism. So before anyone can even raise it, they've all got some charity or not-for-profit thing on the side where they're trying to put back or give the...
You've seen a lot of sports people
you see
do it.
a lot
LeBron
of them
James
do
and
it,
stuff, they're sending... Spending
A
X
lot of
amount of
them are-
millions and they're sending
They're going into
underprivileged children
Africa.
to university.
There
and
was
stuff
a
like
rapper
that.
who set up electric light for
Akon.
So there's stuff like that, but we're a bit lazy about really homing in on the stuff that they're doing. So we take them on face value and we dismiss them because they don't measure up on the scale of blackness according to whatever we decide it is for each individual. And we completely ignore the fact that behind the scenes, some of them have got some serious projects going on. And we should be finding out a bit more. Some of them are creating jobs, for other people. They're doing things and that's the bit of them that we need to get a bit more smarter about highlighting.
Absolutely.
In terms of the soundings from the community, the black community, is there value in that unsatisfied feeling within the black community that actually speaks to a truth? If the way you are perceived as a black person hasn't changed, if people are still being killed in the streets, then what is the value of this black success?
I think part of the problem is there's a feeling of, well, you're successful, so you should be doing. And there's not enough inward looking about, well, what am I doing? This man has set an example for good or for bad. What does that tell me, and what does that actually put into my mind
That's it.
about
We're
what
too
I
busy
might
looking at
possibly?
others instead of looking at yourself.
We have to be prepared to take responsibility for our own change. You know, we can feel the pain, and you know, we can remain. We just can't remain angry, because if we remain angry, we're just going to remain.
But what my question is there value in the soundings that is coming from our community that something isn't serving us?
The difficulty is we sit with it and people become stuck, and we haven't found a way to use that discontent and the fear and the anger to generate some kind of energy to then turn it into some kind of action. So people are very stuck with that feeling and they can't move on. So they become angrier and angrier, and the resentment starts to build, and that's where we get the explosions. We haven't been able to convert those feelings into something productive.
We have to build our own cooperatives and start rebuilding from the ground up, because we're just stuck. A lot of us are just stuck. And it will take some time, because, you know, through all that, we'll go through things that fall down, people who perhaps are not as committed as we think they were. And so you have to be in it for the long haul, but you have to start.
But going back to my central point, when Trayvon Martin was killed, there was no noise from Barack Obama. Absolutely nothing.
There's no voice.
There was nothing. The community rose. So, yes, the community needs to do more, but in sometimes I think the community are actually leading. They're saying we need something else.
Maybe success is not always about what trickles from the top downwards. Maybe success has to come from the bottom up.
Absolutely. We have to take responsibility ourselves.
We need to flip the script.
So what does that mean then?
Absolutely.
What does that
It means
mean?
that we have to, because the feeling is there, we have to now find ways to harness that, and turn it in. We need to start coming up with strategies, and we've got a blueprint for this stuff. We need to go back to what worked and tap into the things that, even going back a few decades ago, that our parents were using. Some of those strategies are still valid today. The world's changed a bit.
and so forth. Yeah.
We might need an updated version of that, but it worked.
Yeah.
And we've all seen evidence of the fact that stuff like that. So if we could use that to get housing, why can't we use that to fund businesses and create cooperatives? We know there are ways of generating money, so why don't we go back to the things that we did actually?
I think we're just far too trusting into this society, the human society, European, business structure and the European business, and we're far too trusting.
Yeah.
I mean, the banks couldn't have turned us over any more than they had. People lost their livelihoods, houses, life savings, and that was down to the banks.
Yeah.
How many people are going to Western Union? No, we're still going to Santander and TSB and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
We're just far too trusting.
Very good point.
So I think we need to trust ourselves and believe in ourselves and build
that's
our
life
own.
in general, though. If you've got a stomach ache, a headache or something, you go to the doctor. Okay, he studied something, but you put your whole life in his hands. Is he correct?
Some things we have control of, though, don't we?
I was going to go into something else about Dr. Saber and that sort of thing, but maybe that's another topic.
Yes, you
Your
can
point
discuss it then.
about sort of making comparisons with other communities, and we're not comparing light with light, but they don't put all of their trust in the banking system. They've all got their financial arrangements on the side that they use to generate funds, and this is all outside the system.
Absolutely.
So we're the ones who have lost ground on that.
We need to take responsibility. We need to build our own. We need to invest in our own. We need to
We're in control of our destiny, basically.
Absolutely. We need to sustain our own. That's the only way. We can't keep looking at, the politicians and what they have said, or Brexit. I mean, Brexit means nothing. It's not changed anything for us. It never was going to.
It wasn't there in the beginning.
Absolutely.
They've gone back to, trying to go back to what was there originally. They tried something, it didn't work. Okay, let's come back out of Europe. But a couple of weeks after saying that, there's a clause in there. If it don't work, you can get back in. So
it's ridiculous.
the whole thing's a farce.
If anything, it should be another trigger for us to galvanise quicker. It's another hello. Really need to get ourselves together. Absolutely.
We're taking what they say as gospel. Is it?
And waiting, sitting around and waiting. Keep
in
voting.
life, I suppose, everyone sits and complains about things, but we're having a discussion here. But everybody, you go to work and stuff, people are saying, oh yeah, but this, but that. Come on, if everybody's saying the same thing, we all need to get together and say, well, okay, we will make that change.
And on that note, we shall bring this discussion to an end. Thank you to our panelists. Message me on Facebook, Ras Kush-I Sakul, or on Twitter at Kush-I 730. This was Organize, Reason, and Talk. Thank you. Organize, sit down, reason, and talk.